engines fire up when ready to help with sword. Flight 370 take from Kuala Lumpur. Mayday, mayday, things 50 on my own battery fire. 239 lives, a risk situation so dire. Lost contact with the Boeing commercial airplane. Faulty satellite data being the weak link in this chain. 20 superconductor scientists on this flight. Does that have anything to do with it? It just might. 1, 2, 3 plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that's the technology. These EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 orbs with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. Where did it go? What's the notion? Which island? Which ocean? Did it crash in the sea or on land? Fourth port out west for this sleight of hand. For 4 days the passengers' phones were on. Who's responsible for these people being gone? Classified documents like a sales promotion. Debris found impossibly in the wrong ocean. Dark energy, ether, cold fusion, 0-point energy. Not solid, liquid, or gas. Plasma is the key. A paradigm shift in our technology. An unlimited reservoir of energy. Floating through the air round and round. And helpless on the ground. Or flight defying what we were taught. We've been lied to by science is my next thought. Whistleblowers die again and disappear. Industry saying nothing to see here. Is by humans this was created and engineered. 1, 2, 3 plasma orbs coming out of 777. Folks flying out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that technology. These EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 orbs with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. The ether is real. This is real. The truth will come out. The truth will be shown. What happened to Flight 370? Around the world it will soon be known.
Welcome back, and thanks for being here. I'm just going to share Ashton's X stuff again, because that's what that song is about the 0-point energy stuff with Flight MH370. So he's been going through the science behind it. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So MH370 disappeared. There was these orbs flying around, and it ended up being like a classified military project and stuff. But he talks about it. He's been talking about it a lot. And on X, he's at Just X Ashton. And then for his YouTube, it's youtube.com/@JustXAshton. So definitely give him a follow. I think he's going to be on later on tonight. I think you had to push it back till today. So definitely check him out. Okay, my computer's lagging a little bit today, but Today I'm gonna be going over like a little bit of the past, how we got here, a little bit of history of like psyops and stuff like that, propaganda, right? And then my predictions for the future, because a lot of people are paying attention to like the big game that they're playing, but they're not really looking at the big picture. So it's not the first time in history that we've sort of been here, and they sort of been putting out for a while what the plan is, and it's not like what people think it is. And it was going to happen no matter who got into office. That's the way these things work, right? Is that they're the puppet masters behind the strings. So definitely we're going to get right into it. One of the first videos that I'm going to share is from Isiri and their digital twin stuff.
What makes GIS accuracy of the information? We can look at an area and recreate it with a game engine and create a 3D world, but with GIS allows us to take information that data surveyors, remote sensing, highly accurate information, to transform that data through GIS, through programs like ArcGIS City Engine, and bring them into a game engine to create a digital twin. It isn't just a visual representation of a place, it is the representation of a place. For example, in Morrisville, North Carolina, there was concern over density. The community was a little undecided on if they wanted 1 to 2 story buildings with surface parking lots, or if they wanted multi-story buildings with parking garages, sort of a more rural town center compared to urban town center. And through the help of the game engine, we're able to help this community break that impasse. We built out 2 versions of the future town center, placed them inside of it, allowed them to walk around, visit, explore. Ultimately, they decided for a more compact, higher density town center with taller buildings. And so something as a planner that we like to see, because it reduces dependency on the automobile and really makes a place more walkable and engaging. What makes GIS special, or almost critical to the work that we do, is the accuracy of the information.
Have you ever wondered why there is no bridge between Europe and Africa? The distance between Spain and Morocco is only 14 kilometers, separated by the Strait of Gibraltar. This distance doesn't seem like a big deal, especially when compared to existing projects.
What makes GIS special, or almost critical to the we do, is the accuracy of the information. We can look at an area and recreate it with a game engine and create a 3D world. But what GIS allows us to do is to take that accurate information, that data that's been prepared by surveyors.
Have you ever wondered why there is no bridge between Europe and Africa? The distance between Spain and Morocco is only 14 kilometers, separated by the Strait of Gibraltar. This distance doesn't seem like a big deal, especially when compared to existing projects, such as the 50-kilometer-long undersea channel tunnel between the UK and France, or the world's longest bridge, stretching 106
a digital virtual representation of an object system. Like me, digital twins are updated with real-time data which can be used for machine learning and reasoning to make better decisions. Disturbing, but yes. And what can we do with a digital twin? Let's get into it. Well, that's odd. Digital twins are usually objects like wind turbines, and they're fitted with various sensors, and those sensors capture data and different aspects of the physical object performance, like in this case, energy output and temperature. And that live data is applied to the digital copy of the wind turbine, its digital twin. From there, we can study all sorts of potential situations, analyze performance problems, and create potential enhancements that can be used to improve the real-life physical object. Now, doesn't this all sound a little bit like a simulation? Kind of does. But digital twins are actually virtual environments that operate quite differently from simulations. Now, in a simulation, we model a system or a process to understand its behavior under specific conditions. And simulations, they are static snapshots in time. They are snapshots in time that represent predefined scenarios. But a digital
They do the same thing with you, and Siri actually does sell a corporate model for corporations and that, right? Downtown districts and stuff like that can map you around this place. They have predictive crime that they can do. So anyway, that's the database that Tim Walls absolutely loves and loves to use. So they were planning on doing that either way. And usually the way that it works, if you look at history, is that they play both the left and the right to get them extreme, and then they make sure there's a pop-off event. And then they have the solution, which is a clamp down or whatever to put in their emergency powers or executive orders or like laws that normally people would be against because they have to manufacture that consent. So that's what they're planning. And if you go to 3GPP stuff, you can see the rollout for 6G and stuff like that. And so there's going to be a lot more sensors. It's the Internet of Everything. You're going to be plugged in. You're going to be a sensor. Like all the LED lights are sensors for that because it's also faster than light technology too. And 3GPP got started in 1998 to standardize the EMF stuff with the cell phone towers and whatever else for the operations. So it could be interoperational throughout the world. And it's the IEEE that sort of oversees some of that. And that's the International Electrical Engineers, something or other. I forget the last E. But yeah, I'll pull that up in just a second here. Let the video play a little bit longer.
digital twin, it goes beyond this. It's a living representation of a specific physical asset. So unlike a simulation, a digital twin is continuously updated using real-time data. That's data from sensors reflecting its unique state. So for example, a digital twin of a turbine in a wind farm can track its real-time blade vibration and temperature, predicting maintenance needs and optimizing performance. And digital twins are designed around a two-way flow of information that occurs. Object sensors provide relevant data twin, and then that happens again when the insights created.
So that's like your RFID chips in your cards, right? That's like your cell phone. That's like your smart TV. That's like your Roomba. That's like your Alexa. Okay, it's all feeding into your digital twin. Everything you do online, and it's being used to predict and program. So that's just that. I'm gonna see if I can find another one from a series, but I want to show you the 3GPP stuff over here. So it's a third generation partnership project. And it's founded in 1998. It's made up of different standard development organizations. So there's a couple different organizations that are part of it. And those organizations then do the standardization for the rollouts. Okay. And they have the 6G scenarios and stuff like that. So they also have their timeline online too. So yeah, they're in the beta phase right now, right? They're supposed to have the working groups, whatever, get the standardization on board. And then after that, they're going to be doing the rollout. It's supposed to be fully rolled out by 2030, but they have to do the beta tests in that first. So they're working on the 5G plus right now. So yeah, here's their landmark years, and you can read back through back to 1987. That's funny. But yeah, 2020 was the push for 5G, right? And then they finished it in 2021 there, and they been pushing the rollout, right? And then they're getting ready for the 6G. So usually there has to be some sort of major disruption for people to accept it. Like people were pushing back against 5G, if you remember, in 2019. I'm gonna come back over here and look at my history to see if I can find the 3GPP1 as well. I guess search. Yeah, there we go. So here's a little bit about 3GPP and the digital revolution. Remember, this is already planned, so it's been planned for many years.
Specification of the different generations of 3GPP is a partnership program between 7 standard development organizations, SDO, across the world that they got together and they create a partnership program to create specifications that they can adopt then in the different SDOs.
The work is done in a collaborative fashion by different member organizations, and the results of those are then transmitted back to the member organizations that publish them as national standards.
It really has been this successful partnership program which has produced the specification of the different generations of cellular systems. And as we now are in the full evolution of LTE, we are also starting to work on the 5G because, of course, our partners really want us to develop a 5G system, make the IMT 2020 submission for IQR, and will basically address
2020, and when they switched from whatever it was in 98 to the digital future in 2000, it's real interesting because then like everybody was declaring it, we're entering in the technology age and whatever else.
Address the connectivity needs of our partners for the next decade.
In this particular case, we have a set of shared objectives that we've been able to glean through work that's been done in many of these regional organizations, NGMN being one of them, and 4G Americas, organizations in each of the regions. And these organizations have basically produced vision and requirements. The basic requirements are coming from MT 2020 through the ITU. And in the end, what 3GP will do is produce standards to satisfy those requirements.
There are different views on where operators want to deploy the new radio and exactly the use cases for the new radio. But looking at the whole approach, we have decided that we are going to design a fully capable system meeting all the IMT 2020 requirements by beginning of 2020, where there will be the release 16 freeze in March 2020. By that time, we will have a fully capable system meeting all the requirements. But at the same time, the emerging consensus is we will do an earlier version of the 5G specification with not addressing all the capabilities, but addressing some more stringent market needs that are a little bit earlier than others. And for that, we will have an earlier release in mid of 2018, addressing only a subset of the use cases and the requirements, but based on the market needs, we will establish. You can already see some emerging earlier market needs, but we are not making at this point in 3GPP. At the moment, we are going to start a study looking at the broader picture, try to address, have a design of the new radio and platform which is flexible enough so that all the use cases will eventually be addressed. But when time comes...
Okay, I think you get that. Yeah, it's just interesting, you know. And so how they would do that. Okay, then we also have to look at the past. Okay, we have to sort of look at like how they influenced us in the past too. So that's what we're gonna do. I have a guest that I'm trying to get on, so it might cut out for a second. I'm trying to work on a few things to see if I can get him in here. But I will share. If it'll actually pull up here, give me 1 second. It's something from the city pages back in the day. I think it is. Yeah. So give me 1 second. I'm going to see if I can get my guest in real quick, and then we'll go over this. So this was from 1995, right? And it goes through like how Minneapolis has been corrupt since its founding, right? It was known as that. Okay. And the biggest thing that we had up here is logging, and then we had the mills. After that, then we also had the mining in that, right? And those industries brought a lot of money, and they also brought a lot of corruption. So like even back to the days where it was just a territory, you had the Astors, which were huge into the furs. You had the Rockefellers, and then a couple others as well. And so they ended up getting in bed with some of the people that were here, and like they fought over the mines and like the logging stuff and stuff like that. Not necessarily on the mills. That ended up being other people. But there was also tribes here, and so that was interesting with the treaties, because the settlers ended up fighting and like basically taking land that they shouldn't have, before the treaties were signed, and like they got across the river type thing, because the Minnesota River was like one of the cutoffs, right? And same thing with the Mississippi. Um, so that gets interesting. Um, and where that whole war came from was, so like they already knew that there was some gold out west, and they knew that they needed to get the railroads put in. Some of the big landowners had already basically bought some of the land from the tribes for their railroad routes. It gets real interesting. And then like when they did the Homestead Act, they purchased the land that way too, in big swaths, and then they sell parts of it off. But the Homestead Act itself is pretty interesting, because like you have to realize that they got a lot of land, right? And there's a reason for that, because like not every place is like Minnesota. Okay, some of the places it takes a heck of a lot more. It takes a heck of a lot more land to run the cattle in that, because the grass isn't nearly as rich as it is here in Minnesota, and they knew that ahead of time. And so you also had to clear the land. So like if there was trees in that, and you had to clear that, it took a lot of work to be able to do. And if you did it without just straight purchasing the land, you also had to do a building and improvements and whatever else on that. So I'm just going to look up exactly how much land it was and what the rules for that were. The Homestead Act. So it's up to 100, and you say it's 160 acres. I thought that originally like it was like more than that. They ended up cutting it down just because it was like too much land for people to handle, just one family. You got to remember, this is before the big mechanization and stuff, so it was like horses and wagons and crap like that, right? And they had just acquired this land, okay? Like they hadn't acquired it too much before the Civil War. And so then like you have a whole bunch of land that you don't have people on. In order to defend it and keep your land, right, you sort of need people, otherwise other people are just going to go on there. That was a big part of the reason why the Civil War did happen. They were already talking about like what it looked like for the end of slavery and whatever before the Civil War. They were just arguing over certain specific parts of it. But part of it is that they needed people to go, and not everybody wanted to go out west. And there's a push-pull type thing too, because they also had like the gold rushes and that. And the gold rushes, they ended up, how to put it, like they ended up winking a lot of people because there wasn't nearly as much gold as people said there was. It's a lot harder to find and stuff, and they made a lot of money setting up the trading posts and whatever else along the way. So like the rich people did that, okay? The shopkeepers did, and then you had brothels, and then you had saloons, and then you go down the list, right? So that just gets interesting, because back over here it talks about like the brothels and the right and the Minneapolis Confidential stuff here. So there's some more in here that I wanted to get into though. Well, actually, so like, yeah, the whole war of the Dakota Indian, whatever war that we had up here, it started off over by Acton, Minnesota. And Acton is like in the middle of nowhere over by Litchfield. And it was some kids that stole some eggs and then got into it with a farmer, and they ended up killing them. And instead of like the leader apologizing, the leader of the tribes, he ended up saying, yeah, it's pretty much a go, because they had been promised like supplies and that and stuff from the Indian agent. The Indian agent had sort of taken the money and gone over, and he had sort of squandered it, man, on furs that weren't able to get out of port. And so they ended up telling the natives to eat their grass and their own poo. And so then, yeah, their hunting areas had been decimated, and a lot of the land had already been cleared and whatever else. And so, like, yeah, they rose up, and then that's how that went down, you know. And it's weird because it's even like farm to farm different, because like some of them were nice to people who have been nice to them, and vice versa, and then others were just like kill them all. So it gets interesting. But yeah, that was and they ended up ending with a treaty, and then like the whole Dakota hanging thing and stuff. So I mean, we violated that treaty right away afterwards with the gold rush over to the Black Hills. So it's just interesting to know, you know. It wasn't necessarily how people say it was, but there was bloodshed on both sides and bad things done on both sides. So like we can't really like deny that. So, and it's funny because the guy who did the Prohibition Act for the alcohol ended up being a guy from up here. That was like the mob's huge thing up here, was that really got him big. I mean, they were in before that, right? So, yeah, but it was known as like a drunk, filled place with like, yeah, drifters, and he went down the list, and yeah. So, and the thing of it is, like, once the timber ended and stuff like that, it got real interesting, because you'd have ebbs and flows with some of the workforce. And so we had a lot of communists up here, and what they'd do is they get in when like there was issues at the plant, and then they do the strikes. But a lot of times the strikes get out of hand. There's actually like riots and stuff. And they were also the union busters on the other side. A lot of times up here, the mob would like pay off the union heads with like cars and whatever else to be able to get their way. And so like the union head really didn't represent the union. He basically was just like the big mob guy, right? So the union would get part of what they wanted, but not everything, and all that jazz. But before there was indoor plumbing in that, yeah, they just, the wastewater was dumped in the river or on the streets. Typhoid gripped the city, right? And it forced water and sewer lines to be laid. And like the coal fires and whatever else, and the animals, they just would poop in the streets, right? The animals would. And then yeah, like dead dogs and stuff like that. So just like, well, it wasn't like a nice place to be, man. So it gets interesting. That's in the late 1800s there. But the interesting thing about the indoor plumbing in that is Milwaukee was a communist city, and that was the first one to really put in indoor plumbing in the city parks and the kids' sports. It's not everything the communists did were bad either, okay? And you got to realize that psyops were played on both sides. And so, like, they would take people's recognition of a problem or want for something, like safe working conditions, because the mills and that they were dangerous as places to work, man. Some of them blew up and stuff like that. It catch fire, and you get that dust in your lungs, and then you end up basically having bread in your lungs. Like, it's gross, dude. So yeah, dude, like they were petitioning for like better working conditions and whatever else. So yeah, here gets into the Minneapolis combination, and that was right after the Civil War, and it was a big gambling dealio. So right after the Civil War, it got up to 165,000 people in Minneapolis. And that's what it was known for, because this is, well, like, as I said, the gold rushes and stuff like that were going on. And so Minneapolis was like a starting point a lot of times for people heading that way for South Dakota. And they sell people what they needed and supplies and stuff to get out there. But yeah, they teach the mobsters from Chicago and all that jazz. And it got so bad that that's the reason why they ended up having prohibition, is because like people weren't against alcohol, but like everybody being drunk and getting in fights and whatever else all the time. That was not cool. So because the tree stuff was only seasonal, but yeah, there's over 150 brothels, right? And like the city had a racket with that and all that jazz, even after like the prohibition of that. Sorry, I'm getting down a little bit further to where I wanted to show a couple of things, because this gets real interesting. Because I don't think Minneapolis has really changed after this, and they want to act like it once was a good city, in the early 1910s. Like the Prince of the Muckrackers said, because he did talk about Tammany Hall, that Minneapolis was known for its deliberateness, invention, and of rice that had never been equaled. And they got Doc Ames went in, the A.A. Ames, right? Yeah, he says that he'd make John Gotti blush, dude. That's how bad he was. And like, so he fired all the cops and then put in his guys, anywhere from like money laundering to one of his guys was a morphine dealer, right? Thieves, and like they'd run their graft and you had to pay them for protection or let them run their stuff. If they fired 107 honest police officers. And what got caught is that yeah, so like sorry, 1 second here. So yeah, they even got at Pabst Brewing Company, they got employed to raid the company's safe. Well, they stood by and like watched out for them. So the police were running a racket for that. Give me 1 second here. I'm gonna try to redo this link. Okay, sorry, I'm sharing this out to see if I can get my guest on. Yeah, they were so corrupt that the police officers guarded the robbers, right? And they got kickbacks and everything else. And what got them in trouble was that there was two people that they were supposed to get out of. Yeah, there's right here. There's two thieves that they were supposed to spring from jail, and they ended up not being able to. And so sorry. And so after they weren't able to spring them out of jail, what happened was that they sort of sung like a bird, right? And they went to the grand jury and told them everything. Okay, but by 1910, it was 301,000 people, and a lot of the mobsters up here were Jewish, and they were well into it prior to the prohibition, but prohibition really got him started. It's you got Kid Can. Minnesota 13 was the liquor up here, and stuff like that. But instead it was really anti-Semitic in 1923. The thing of it is, though, the German Jews that came initially were pretty well off. Okay, they were like your aristocrats, whatever else, and so like they just didn't like the Eastern Jews. There was a big like rift between the two. But yeah. So part of it was like they sort of had strange practices and that, and so like people just were like, no, we don't really want that. But so Isidore Blumenfield, it's Kid Can, man, and so that's where they got their start. And then you have when Volstead did Prohibition, right, really launched them. And in here it talks about how they get in bed with Meyer Lansky, stuff like that, a couple others. Um, yeah, Yiddy Bloom, Barney Berman. The Berman brothers went on to Las Vegas. So like, and one of the things that Myron Sugarman talks about is when the Jewish gangsters got the okay to beat up the silver shirts or whatever, which were the pro-Nazi people in the U.S. But the Jewish mob actually got paid to go beat them up and stuff. So that's interesting. So, and at the same time, though, this was at the same time that communism was huge in Minnesota, and it still is. But they were like literally sending people over to like the Leninist Marxist Institute, whatever, and in Russia. So yeah, the Walter Liggett stuff. Floyd B. Olson, he was a governor up here that was linked to them. Hubert Humphrey was linked to them. In fact, Hubert Humphrey tried to renounce them, but he didn't really do a good job of it. Harold Stassen supposedly, I think, cleaned it up, but no, not really. You sort of had to deal with them. So the question is, did they ever go away? And you look at it, well, one of the groups was the Sabowitches, and we call them the Sabes now. And yeah, I'm going to hop on over to some clippings and show you a little bit from the news, a different newspaper clipping of some stories about them and what they were doing back then. So in this one, it talks about them getting paid off, the Teamsters getting paid off by the Sabes. I can scroll through there and try to find that if you want, but there's another one. Oh, yeah, and one of them was a spy, supposedly. So, yeah, here's a, a guy from Sabe's family that was violating prohibition, and this is a different he also did a different trial where he bought off the union head, and he gave him a car and stuff, and they were asking about the loans and whatever else. And that gets interesting because they also were doing the same thing in the 90s. So over here, Russia executed one of them as a spy. So they owned American Fruit Company. Not American, I'm sorry, not American. Oh wait, sorry, not United. It was American Fruit Company. And they had their own like part of a bank or whatever that they made. So yeah, and the bank was the first produce state bank. Yeah, I'm gonna search in this so I can get it to pull up real quick. Yeah, right here. This is the one. Yeah. So he lent money to the Teamsters and stuff, and they did. So what happened is that all these other places were getting strikes done on them, and they were able to keep going because they paid off the Teamsters, and they all made bank off of it. So yeah, that stuff was happening. Is American Fruit and Produce Company, and then they were also on the board, and they had a couple other friends on the board of the I think his first bank system, which ended up being a front for all the mobsters. So, but that's not one that is listed in this article. So I just wanted to bring that up. Let's talk about the Bermans a little bit. There's also another Berman family too. They got really big into the casinos, but the Sabes and the Bermans, they helped get the gambling legal and get it onto the reservations, where they continue to run things supposedly, along with some people like La Cosa Nostra, Gambinos, Lucchese. So yeah, it's just wanted to show you. It's kind of interesting that yeah, it hasn't really ever stopped, right? And so even down like at the bottom here, it basically says that, hey, look, like Fauché got in trouble. Fauché Towers downtown, right? And all that jazz. But once the Panama Canal went through, it really stopped the importance of Minnesota, and then like milling ended up going other places and stuff like that. So by the Great Depression, like there's a lot of problems, and then that's where the reason they had all those strikes from the Great Depression is because they had all these workers and not enough jobs. Floyd B. Olson tried a communist perspective or a socialist perspective on some of it, but it didn't really work out. So, and then yeah, people started leaving because like there was enough jobs. 1950s when Minneapolis population peaked. And then as it went on the decline, of course, people got upset, right? And then you had the 60s riots, and then the Great Flight after that. I'm just checking back over. Doesn't look like he was able to get in. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to mute myself for 1 second. I'm going to actually throw on another video for you guys. and I'll be back in just 1 second to continue going. Actually, you know what? I'll just finish going over this real quick. Yeah, so it basically just says, these problems weren't unknown. So in 93, it says basically that they had the same problems that they had, and it wasn't a utopia in 1892, 1942, or 1992. Yeah, that it's all nostalgia, not necessarily history. So I'm gonna mute myself real quick. I'm gonna show a real quick video about some of the stuff that the settlers dealt with, and then I'll be right back.
When I started drinking warm water to help me lose weight,
On May 20, 1862, more than a year into the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Homestead Act to secure homesteads to actual settlers on the public domain. This piece of legislation and its promise of free land would trigger a western migration that would alter the shape of the Great Plains and the American West.
A lot of ways the term homestead is used is it's the first place your ancestors lived in Kansas. That was their homestead. Well, not necessarily. It might have been the first place your ancestors lived, but maybe they did not homestead it, because homesteading was a government process where you live on the land, cultivate so many acres. Living on the land, you had to have habitation, and you had to live there for 5 years before you would get the land patent, which that is another term for the deed from the American government that you own the land.
We like to think, well, it was just a bunch of individuals who decided to move out here and settle the West. It happened that way. They were recruited. They didn't make that decision to come out here just because they wanted to go west. There's the homesteads, there's the rich promoting it. It all fits together.
In 1860, surplus land left in the United States, but the American Civil War was going on. So in 1863, the law was enacted, and then the thing came through.
The settlement by Euro-Americans in this area in western Kansas is all post-Civil War. Now the county I'm in, Brooks County, a couple of counties east, almost everything starts about 1875, those settlements. And the peak is in the 1880s. By the 1890s, most of the area settled. And
homesteading was very, very important on settling the west of the Missouri River. They had planned on this prior to the Civil War. They went out to sent surveyors out, government surveyors, and they were supposed to do townships and ranges, and they were also dividing into sections of land. But townships and ranges were first, and the township thing gets complicated because some townships are a geographic area and the other townships are political areas. And you say, what's the difference? Well, a township to the American government is an area 6 miles north and south and 6 miles east and west. Why do we call them townships? That was set up.
Okay, so I'm not sure how much more of that part of it's going to get into. There's another video I was going to share as well after this one, but we'll just see what they have to say real quick, a little bit more.
Up with the idea that it took 36 square miles to support a town. And that's where you get the term township. I mean, 36 square miles out here now.
Well, that survey system was designed in 1795.
And was designed on settlement on the east.
In the east, yeah.
And then you would number the sections, or the 640-acre tracts, which are 1 mile by 1 mile within the township, and that was a standardized deal. It was all government control. I mean, it was a statute set up, so the government surveyors came out in parts of Kansas as early as the 1850s. They were measuring it to find out how much was there instead of just estimating. They were looking at the soils. They were looking at the natural resources as far as the surveyors would put in trees, good for timber, which would be good for building houses, or rock. In Sheridan County, they talked about a surplus of magnesia limestone, which is the yellow rock. Now, there are qualifications to do a homestead. You were supposed to be at least 21 years of age, or the head of a household, and these change throughout time, or you could be a widow to get a homestead. Another way that they had for a homestead was the soldier script. And you know from the homestead stuff that there were soldier lands where the amount served in the service, in the Union service, not the Confederate,
Right.
that they got credit.
Yeah.
So if they served, we'll use the example of 3 years, all they had to do is live 2 years on their homestead to qualify for the 5-year minimum.
The number of Civil War veterans that came west, of course, at the close of the war, many of these people wondered what they were going to do, but the Homestead Act stimulated, and I'm just amazed at how many Civil War veterans there are that came west.
But again, the government wanted to get rid of the land. Get rid of the land, but people want, taxes are there, commodities are grown, and so it was just a development thing, and how else to do it? It gave everybody a chance, whether you were American born or not, because one of the qualifications is you were either an American citizen or with the intention of becoming an American citizen. So at the land office, you signed a paper of intention that you were going to become an American citizen. That's why a lot of people from Eastern Europe came in, because America and land speculators were doing a lot of advertising in Europe and saying how much free land was out here, and you could get 160 acres, but the minimum was of the government units was 40 acres. The thought of the time, which was kind of confusing, in the eastern United States, you could make a living 40 acres because the soil was better. You didn't have the extreme weather conditions that you have on the high plains. And even the Kansas congressman at the time, the senators and representatives, said that doesn't work because in Kansas you can't make a living on 160 acres. There were some of the senators in Kansas were proposing that a homestead would be one section or 640 acres that might be more feasible, but that didn't work. So if a homesteader came out, he had the land, and part of the homesteading law was to build a structure on it. So a lot of people started with dugouts, where there was a sloping bank and you would dig a hole. Yeah, so here's what was
Could you imagine living in that? That'd be crazy, man. So it wasn't like just all rainbows and sunshine. A lot of people died coming over too. We're just gonna watch a tiny bit more of that. I just wanted to show you that like it wasn't just like easy either.
It was probably used as a cellar, but this could have been the first habitation. We have a kind of a curved wall here, but a straight wall over here. Meaning that maybe there was a stove put in there. But a lot of people lived in a cellar-looking structure called the dugout in the early years. Temporarily, it was shelter, and it was an improvement on the place to comply with the homestead laws. And later, a lot of times people built the house over the original dugout. We're at the Prairie Museum of Art and History. Here is a replicated sod house that was built in 1982 as a replica on the museum grounds, and it's a very good example of the typical sod house. The sod was available everywhere, and it is from the native grass, the buffalo grass, the grama, the short grass prairie which we're in. When you made a sod house, you wanted the soil to be moist, because if it was very dry and you turned this sod over and tried to carry it and build a wall out of it, the dirt held in the roots would fall out, just like transplanting any sort of plant today. And so a sod plow was used in most cases, and there was a plow that had a regular steel share on it, but there was usually
I think you guys get the drift on that one. So if you ever played Oregon Trail growing up, then you sort of already know on that stuff. We're gonna watch one more, and then just about some of the other trials that people went through and that, and then I'll explain how that ties into it.
In the decades after the Civil War, thousands of farmers moved west into the Great Plains, taking advantage of the cheap land provided by the Homestead Act. The act was signed by Abraham Lincoln in 1862 to encourage western migration. Under the act, settlers could receive title to 160 acres of western land if they were at least 21 years old, if they built a house at least 12 by 14 feet in size, and if they worked their land for 5 years.
The way the Homestead Act worked, you would go out to the land office of every region that you were planning to settle in, and you would pick your plot of land, you would build your house, and you would do the things that you needed to do to meet the criteria set up by the federal government.
By 1900, claims for over 80 million acres had been filed, creating more than 372,000 farms.
Many people who benefited incredibly, who would never have had the access to land if it hadn't been for the Homestead Act.
Simply owning land, Western farmers had to survive the harsons on the Great Plains in order to succeed. Many soon saw their dreams dashed. Decades of drought ravaged small farms. Price for crops fell as mechanized corporate farms rose. Railroads imposed steep rates to transport their goods, or refused to serve rural areas altogether. When small farmers complained, railroad baron William Vanderbilt uttered his famous line, "The public be damned." Many farmers took on back-breaking debt in order to keep their farms. Eventually, they banded together, forming cooperatives that gave them the economic and political strength to survive.
So I just wanted to show you guys something real quick as well. The International Lenin School was in Russia, and there's actually people from Minnesota that went over there. So, like, you can see why, like, when people first came over here and they were settling in their rural areas, there's a lot of work to actually be able to farm in that. So a lot of the people went to the city when they were looking for a better life or education or whatever. Didn't always play out that way, and obviously the jobs ebbed and fell, right? And the communists wanted to have an actual revolution, and Floyd B. Olson actually tried, you know. So it's just interesting because, like, we literally sent people from Minnesota to this this group over there. Sorry, one second here. I'm going to mute myself for just 1 second, and I'll probably play a song in the meantime, and I'll be right back. So I'm still trying to get my guest on. So give me 1 second. We'll be back to talking about the International Leninist School.
Engines fired up and ready to help it soar. Flight 370 takes off in Kuala Lumpur. Dangerous lithium-ion battery fire. 230 situation so to this Boeing. Satellite data being the weak in this thing. Conductor scientist on this flight, does that have anything? 1, 2, 3, plasma all out of nowhere. It's a 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing more and even more being left unsaid. 0 point energy, that's the technology to these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 off with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia flight 370 away. They go, what's the note? Which island, which ocean? Did it crash in the sea or land? 4th port out west for this sleight of hand. For 4 days the passengers' phones were on. Who's responsible for these people being gone? Classified documents like a sales promotion. Debris found impossibly in the wrong ocean. Dark energy, ether, cold fusion, 0 point energy. Not solid, liquid, or plasma is the key. Paradigm shift in our technology, an unlimited reservoir of energy. Floating through the air round and round as we stand helpless on the ground. Or to fight defying what we were taught. We've been lied to by science is my next thought. Whistleblowers dying or getting disappeared. Saying nothing to see here. Isn't that just by humans? This was created and engineered. 1, 2, 3, plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's a 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more, even more being left unsaid. 0 point energy, that's the technology to these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 orbs with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia flight 370 away. The ether is real. This is the spiel. The truth will come out. The truth will be shown. What happened to flight 370? Around the world it will soon be known.
Okay, I'm back. So these are some of the influential people that went through the school. And I believe it was Clarence Hathaway. There's a couple of communists from Minnesota that did go over there. And they actually did have some black communists too that went over there as well. Like W.E.B. Du Bois went and studied in Germany in the 1800s. And he went to a school that was known for the communists or socialism. And to put it frankly, like, you have to realize that the labor movement wasn't all good or bad at that time. Because you had things like the Ludlow Massacre. And if people don't know what the Ludlow Massacre was, I'll pull up a video on it here in a minute. I think that people need to know what that is. But yeah, here's Clarence Hathaway, and they actually have Marxist professors still at the U of M that literally are like pushing Marxism. Yeah, here's his topics that he was a big part of, right? So yeah, he's a big part of the DFL. Back when it was just farmer labor, right? So, and he had connections with Floyd B. Olson and Elmer Benson. All that jazz. So, not only was the mob very active up here, so was the communists. So, remember we talked before about Oppenheimer, Robert's brother, I believe it was Frank. He got kicked out of the U of M for being a commie. So, but we actually have, like, literally that the commie is still up here, right? And so you have to realize that when you're doing the labor stuff, that if you are pushing to be paid more than what your value you're adding to the company, eventually you're going to unionize yourself or work yourself out of a job, as far as you'll make it way too expensive for people to be able to hire you. So the company's either going to go under, automate, or find other people, right? Because companies aren't going to pay over the value of your work. The problem is back in the day, I mean, like, there was actual, like, people dying at work and stuff like that, and that's not a good thing. People deserve to have safe working conditions and that, but sometimes there are dangerous jobs out there. So, like, there's a balance. So I'm gonna see if I can find the Ludlow massacre stuff real quick. Because what the powers behind the scenes like to do is that they like to take a actual issue, doesn't matter if it's on the left or it's on the right, is they'll take a legitimate, like, real issue, and they'll manipulate it to get people to do stuff that they normally wouldn't, and that's against their best interest. So, like, how the FBI tried to play the left versus the commies versus the Nazis, and that, or the KKK, you know, and they actually they sent out letters to both of them to try to get them to fight, and they didn't, which is quite interesting, I think. But I can show you that FBI letter here in a little bit. I'm just going to see, yeah, probably do this one right here. And the Rockefellers literally paid off the National Guard to go kill these miners afterwards. So,
From the late 1800s to early 1900s, high-quality coal mined from the southern Colorado coalfields was sought after by the steel industry for its use in railroads and other industry. These coalfields were located east of the Rockies, near the southern border of the state, and included a cluster of towns and coal camps along the Colorado and Southern Railway. 75% of this coal was mined by the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, owned by J.D. Rockefeller. The southern coalfields were home to the bloodiest labor strike in U.S. history, known as the Colorado Coalfield War, with the most devastating event happening in Ludlow, a mine town and United Mine Workers of America tent colony attacked by militia and burned during the Ludlow Massacre. Miners employed by Rockefeller died at twice the rate of the national average, as they were working under dangerous conditions, and the company had little accountability to the miners and their families. They were also always under the watch of company guards, who were privately employed by Rockefeller to exercise control over the miners. Miners lived in company towns and were paid in companies. They were only able to shop at the company store. Hours were long, wages were little, and over a 30-year period until 1914, 1,700 miners were killed in Colorado at the mines. But due to unfair legal practices, only once were found to be at fault. In 1913, the United Mine Workers of America had organized in Colorado, and across the state, the union kicked off a large-scale strike, attempting to improve working conditions and wage. 90% of miners participated, which was about 10 to 12,000 workers. They moved out of the company towns and into nearby tent colonies, sponsored by the UWA, which were strategically located near mine sites to discourage discourage or intercept potential strikebreakers, scabs, who are miners choosing to work during the strike. Ludlow was the largest colony, with 1,200 miners and their families living. For obvious reasons, the strike was not well received by Rockefeller and the company guards. Rockefeller hired additional private security to intervene, and they ended up tormenting miners at the tent colonies even more than they had before. Poured lights at the tents throughout the night and patrolled the edges of the colony in a custom armored car called the Death Special, firing randomly at tents and killing at least one person and injuring others. When the strikers fought back, the governor called in the Colorado National Guard in an attempt to calm the situation. But it only got worse as the private security guards teamed up with the National Guard, and as a unified force, they ramped up the violence. They charged cavalry at families, jailed miners and rounded them up into bullpens, destroyed tents, and were responsible for beatings and other injuries of miners. This continued for 6 months. The violence finally reached its peak at Ludlow in April of 1914, just after the miners
tons in, what do you get? Or 16 tons, whatever it is. It's a big part of that. So
miners had celebrated Easter. In the morning around 9 a.m., a group of miners were discussing an organized armed resistance to the guards with Louis Tychus, who was the Union leader of camp. From a perch at Water Tank Hill, the guards could see the armed miners congregating, and in response they had a machine gun brought up to the hill. 3 women at the railway depot saw this movement and ran to warn the colony of a potential attack. Already in the mood to fight, a few dozen miners took strategic position along the railway cut in front of the colony. Tychus ran towards the guards' camp, waving his arms, hoping to get their attention and prevent a confrontation. But at the same time, the guards on Water Tank Hill detonated 2 rounds of dynamite as a warning to the miners, which was interpreted as an attack, and a firefight commenced. The hill fired upon the railway, and others charged into the colony, killing miners and setting tents on fire. Because of the months-long harassment from the guards, many families had dug pits into the ground under their tents, and would hide in them in order to avoid stray gunfire. This would prove tragic during the massacre, though, because as the fighting took over the colony, one group retreated to a pit, only for the tent to be set on fire above them. With the heat and smoke, they were unable to escape.
I think we're good on that. So you understand like a little bit of why, people organized, right? There was like a reason behind it. So I just wanted to come over here and show that one of the founders of the NAACP is this guy, Oswald Garrison Villard. And then trying to see which one of these guys. One of these guys was the grandson of a slave owner. Yeah, here you go. William English Walling, this guy right here. Yeah, he's descended from a wealthy Kentucky slaveholder, and his wife was a socialist, and Trusky, whatever, and she was a revolutionary communist. So, that gets interesting. We're at the founding of the NAACP. If you look at Franz Boas' real race problem, it gets real interesting because Franz Boas literally said that like we need to make black people more white so that way they can be accepted, rather than like saying, hey, it's cool for them to be them. So, which like I'm cool if people want to be whoever they want to be, but like we shouldn't force things, especially with eugenics and whatever else, right? And these people were big eugenicists, dude. So it gets interesting. But I'm gonna go over here to W.E.B. Du Bois page. So I'm trying to see where it talks about him going to. So he grew up in the North, right? And his great grandfather was a French American Huguenot, and had some kids with some slave women. When he grew up, though, he was free. W.E. Du Bois was. So yeah, here we go. So for the university education, he attended Fisk University, and then he went to Harvard, and didn't accept some of his credits. So yeah, in the 1800s, he actually went to Harvard, and then from there, he went to Friedrich Wilhelm University, and that's over in Berlin, right? And so he worked with some of the social scientists, like these guys, right? And Max Weber. Well, Max Weber was a sociologist who was real interesting on some of his theories. Yeah, and he was a card-carrying communist too. So it just gets interesting, and they set up the first Pan-African conference, right? And who's the other guy? Stokely Carmichael or whatever. He was another communist as well. And so it's not a big deal that, like, okay, not everything about communism, again, as I said, is bad. It gives us city parks. It gave us kids sports. There's a lot of, some of the positive things that they've done. But they've also been very violent at times, okay? And caused violent revolutions. And that's what they sort of all want to do. And so some of the race problems in the early 1900s was also because you had all these commies trying to push their vision on everybody else, right? And the way that works is like, here, I'm just going to see if I can get the tenets of communism up here so you guys can see. Let's see if this will actually work. Here we go. I forget how many points there are. There's variations, right? So you have like Marxism, Leninism, and then the libertarian. It grew out of the socialist movement in France, from the French Revolution, right? And then, like in the late 1800s, then they ended up having some more ground that they were able to gain. It emerged as a political doctrine under these guys, right? And you can just look up these guys and figure out who they were, right? And in the early 20th century, like 1917, right? All that jazz. There's a lot of bloody stuff, and they killed a lot of people too. And see, both sides use the same tactic, which is like you use people to get into power, and then you slaughter them pretty much. Those are the first people you throw into jail, is those that help support your rise. And even under communism, they still had an oligarchy that was running everything, right? So it wasn't even your pure communism. And everybody had the same, just everybody had crap. So everybody had crappy living conditions and food and whatever else, and forced labor and gulags, and you know, I'm trying to see if they have the 19 points or whatever it is, right? Anyway, like, so what they wanted to do, here's the theory. Okay, basically is like you have to destroy religions in order to be able to, like, for the humanists especially, is like, yeah, state ownership. You have to, like, destroy religion in order to have people get along. So, like, it's pushing the boundaries on everything until you have the state over everything, and the state tells you what to do. So, yeah, but came out of Germany, oddly enough. And so, what was a response to that? So, the response to the communism was state ownership, sort of, or state guidance, but then so communism also wanted globalism and, like, nobody has any identifying features type thing, including heritage and whatever else. So the opposite of that is nationalism. So then you had the rise of nationalism. And if you get into the period of everybody that fled from the communist uprising and where they went, a lot of them went to the Weimar Republic, right? The Weimar Republic was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. So they had, like, mother-daughter teams doing hooking and, like, all the transgender stuff. Yeah, they had, like, the transgender clinic. Give me 1 second here. I'll pull that up. Yeah. So I'm not going to click on the links here, but yeah, that's what they were doing, man. So lots of drugs, stuff like that. And they also had hyperinflation, right? And so Hitler came in and was like, hey, yeah, we're going to clean all that up. And that's sort of, how that started. I would highly suggest going to the National Archives or the Library of Congress to read the stuff on what's documented about Germany, because it gets interesting. And I'm going to see if I can pull it up in here. So give me 1 second. It's on the Library of Congress. If you search, it gets interesting. Because the term concentration camp, if you search by date, it gets interesting. we're going to do oldest first. So they were used for enemies of war. They were used for like natural disasters and displaced persons. And they go back quite a ways. Let's switch it to 150. Yeah, there's two that's been specific I want to show you because they did have two of them in, I think it's Arkansas or Mississippi, something like that. I think it's Mississippi. In the US in the 1930s in response to a natural disaster. Let's see if I can go forward because there's going to be quite a few in here. I think that's probably... Sorry about that. Okay, give me 1 second here. I'm sorry, I thought that was an emergency call from my mom. She just was calling to say hi. So I said, hey, can I call you back, Mom? I just think you guys need to find this real interesting because there's actually a document in here too that describes what the camps were like, okay, in the early 1930s. So it's just going to take a second to get there. So you can see that there's a lot of the concentration camp word, right, throughout history here. Oh, here we go. I can actually choose on the side over here from 1900 to 1999. Oh, did it? Oh, wait, here we go. 1930 to 1939. So yeah, they had camps for like that were labor camps. Is it not going to show the picture? (1937) is when it was. So sorry, I didn't remember how like many there were. It's been a while since I dug through these. Might be my downloads. Give me 1 second here. I'm gonna go back over to a different screen real quick. Oh, here. I know another way I can look it up. Give me 1 second. What's up? Okay, have a good day. You too. Here it is. So yeah, here we go. The refugee camp in Natchez, Mississippi. That where the Devil's Punch Bowl and that was, right? And there's American Red Cross that set it up. Oh, here's another one in Arkansas. Yeah, from the flood of 1927 and 1937. Yeah, American Red Cross set up the camps. So as a response to the disaster, they had white and black concentration camps. So you can look that up if you feel so inclined. But this one is another one I wanted to show you guys. Definitely. And it was about the concentration camps in Germany. Okay, this is from the OSS. And it's a report on October 3rd, 1944. And it is a description of the concentration camps. So we're going to go ahead and read through it. I'm just going to see if I can get an AI to read it for me. Let me see if I can. I can't get it to do it. So, yeah, it's just factual description of concentration camps located within the 1937 boundaries of Germany, their administration and discipline, classification for prisoners, and official and unofficial, and then the routine of camp life and activities, and attitudes of the inmates. So, and it's saying it's sensitive, right? There's a reason I'm going over this, okay, which I think that you'll be readily able to see by the time I get done. Both the left and the right use the same tactics when it comes to the punishing of their enemies, right? Like we saw it happen on the left, and now it's probably going to be happening on the right. But instead of complaining that the government has too much power, people just don't like that the other side has power. You know what I mean? And so, sorry, we already gave that control over to the government. The government can do it, so they're just using the same tactics against you. So the concentration camps are the fundamental institution of the Nazi regime. They serve to detain or eliminate without indictment or trial and without a possibility of appeal any person within the reach of Nazi machinery, right? By virtue of this, not this constant threat of life to the life of every citizen, regardless of his guilt or responsibility, the concentration camps exercise terroristic influence far beyond their physical boundaries. So, the actual number of interned persons provide no clue as to the numerical strength of the anti-Nazi opposition in Germany. There was opposition. In fact, they were blowing stuff up. And they were the whole reason why Kristallnacht happened is because of an assassination. They had assassinated a German diplomat. So, and then after that, on Night of the Long Knives, Hitler starts to carry the SA, but apart from the relatively small stratum of the known opposition leaders and activists, it's more or less a matter of chance who among the opposition may be put into the camp. Chief among the inmates were a great number of Jews, and a great number of Jews were organizing against. I mean, they were also doing bombings in Palestine and stuff. So, yeah, for it was against this group of citizens that the Nazis first directed their terror. They were also the main leaders in Weimar too. Newspaper, brothel owners, and stuff like that. So the trans clinic owners push into the books and that. Anyway, recent reports, however, indicate that a few of the Jews remain in German concentration camps, having been, for the most part, either executed or sent to the Polish camps. The Polish camps were some of those have been taken from Russia. Russian camps were not good either. They were terrible. They killed more people, I think, the Russians did. I know they did during the Holodomor, definitely. But the German concentration camps within this study are camps for political and criminal prisoners under the authority of the Gestapo and SS, located within the 1937 boundaries of Germany. So it doesn't include the Polish camps. They're distinguished from prisons and under the authority of the Minister of Justice, and prison of war camps under the authority of Army. So the emergency decree on 28 February 1933 has suspended the basic civil rights of the German people and eliminated the safeguards against arbitrary imprisonment. No, it sounds like COVID, right? Wonder if that emergency's ever been over, or if that's still going on. They usually just add emergencies. They usually don't cancel them. That's interesting. We've had emergency declarations that are still in place for many, many, many years. Sorry, it's lagging here. So anyway, they made compounds, right? Known as the concentration camps. Besides place of internment, they served as training grounds for the SS as well, and a source of slave labor. We call these refugee camps today, but yeah. They also throw the political dissidents and stuff like that in there. So the officials, however, recruit the trustworthy prisoners for various subordinate posts, mostly concerned with the organization of barracks life, supervision of inmates, and the direction of their work. There was the SS that had the administrative structure, but actually had the inmates providing a lot of this stuff. So the appointment of the prisoner officials is used as an instrument of control over the prisoners, sort of like Stanley Milgram's experiment. But they also did have a say too. So it's supposedly governed, punishment is governed by an official order issued by the SS. Sometimes that doesn't happen and it is taken into their own hands, right? And sometimes it can take the form of restrictions, torture, or death, especially in the case of the Jewish prisoners. The punishment may take the form of revenge for the Nazis, considering the Jews to be prisoners or hostages for the acts of the Jews outside of Germany. So remember, they also had the boycott and everything else because the Jews were boycotting Germany. And they were causing problems on both sides, actually. I mean, they were bombing the British hotels and stuff like that in Palestine. And so it depended on where they were at was where their alliances were. But the communists wanted to stay in Europe and fight for the proletariat, whatever. The Zionists wanted to go to Palestine, and then the assimilated ones were like, hey, I'm just identifying as a whatever country I'm from, like, leave me alone. And so they not everybody was involved with it. But the Zionists were working with the camps to try to get people trained up and have skills to be able to go to Israel, and that was the Havara Agreement. And you can look up the Havara Agreement coin. It's the transfer agreement coin, and you can see the stuff on that. And same thing with the Judenrat too. because the Judenrat also did the quotas of who got sent when they needed the slave labor, of who got sent for labor in that, and then they also worked in that. Anyway, inside the camps, they're submitted for a number of charges. The charges were the prisoners wore a triangular emblem with it on there. The major groupings are political prisoners, criminals, asocials, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexuals, immigrants, race polluters, Norwegians, Poles, German army deserters, black marketeers, second termers, I don't know what that is, the insane, the blind, and the deaf. So those are the vertical groups. And the political prisoners form the most significant class, and they have a somewhat cohesive social existence. The criminals also have special standing within the prison community, and it's due more to their use by the administration than that of the internal factors. The asocials are a large, somewhat amorphous group whose crimes are often ill-defined and whose group life is on a low level. Cutting across those groups are also based factors like race, nationality, length of servitude, and so on. With the exception of the Jews, none of these official or unofficial groupings is distinguished by any special badge. So they didn't have a badge by race or anything like that. Life within the camps, aside from the limited culture activities which men might attempt to pursue, is thoroughly regimented. 13-hour workdays devoted to heavy labor and including considerable war work. Food, medical care are substandard. They had them. Deaths and suicides are common. In some cases, the suicides have actually been encouraged. The prisoners have developed their own code and rules of conduct. Most important, the cooperative group life of the men who form small self-help units designed to provide means of education and social intercourse to augment the food supply. The political prisoners, as representatives of the most cohesive and active element, are the leaders in organizing such units. There's also some secret religious groups. Sorry, it's buffering again. Their activity. The prisoner's code regards escape as an antisocial act because the entire camp is punished for the act of that one individual. However, if the escapee is considered of real importance to the underground, the prisoners are in some cases willing to make an exception for their judgment. On the other hand, the prisoners practice as much secret sabotage as possible. They have purposely constructed flimsy camp structures, buried tools, slow down the work. And so they got punished for that. And then Nazis took an apparent number of people out of increasing number of people out of the camps to send them in special formations to the front. And a manpower shortage compelled the Nazis to use inmates for war work rather than either in the camps or in the nearby plants. So it didn't deplete the numbers, but yeah, it just gets interesting. So you can read through this. I'll post a link to it. But in here, the numbers are totally different. I'm trying to get to where it has the totals. Because that's a interesting place to see, or thing to see. So it goes through the different officers and all that jazz. Here's the punishment in the camps that I'm looking for. That's camp life. Oh yeah, so it goes through like what each of the badges were and stuff like that, and what they were in for. Camp life. Okay, these are the abbreviations. Oh, here's their numbers. Yeah. So this is where it gets interesting. So like, oh, it's gonna mess up, isn't it? Here we go. Oh no, I turned it again. So it has the camp names, and then it has the numbers of prisoners, and then it talks about the totals. So there's some of it that they don't know the locations of. And it's going to pause on me, isn't it? Oh, here we go. Estimated numbers of prisoners right here. Okay. From a low of 170,000 to a high of 370,000. Okay. And then it also talks in here about the population. And that gets real interesting. So I'm going to put this link in here and just take it for what it's worth, man. There's other sources too that you can go look at. Oh, did it not switch over? I'm sorry. Here, this is the tab that I was reading off of. I guess it didn't share it, but yeah, right here is the numbers right there. And this was written in 1944. So, but just go through and read all that, please. Because the thing of it is, though, is it didn't matter if it was the left or the right that got in. I think that we've been to the point where we've gotten radicalized, and on purpose too. And when I say that, not like are wanting to, but as each side gets so far to the left or to the right, that pendulum's going to swing back, right? But any powers that you give to the federal government can and will be used against you as well. Okay. And so, like, maybe we shouldn't be giving that power to the federal government. Okay. And we just saw with the left how they were locking up political dissidents, how they were literally targeting people, how they set up stay behind crews, how they set up shadow governments. And on that, I'm actually going to use Walls's own words in just a second here. Sorry, it's lagging. Okay, here we go. My videos. Sorry about that. I'm back. So okay, sorry about that. Thank you. My son had asked me a question quick. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, it's still glitching out. Thank you. My son had asked me a question quick.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dad, but
Okay. Let's see if I can find that clip now. Okay. Let's see if I can find that clip now. Okay, I know which video it was. So let's see if I can get back into the history here. It was Walls on some lady's podcast, and it was at 11:34. I know which video it was. So let's see if I can get back into the history here. It was Walls on some lady's podcast at 11:34. Okay, I'm gonna come on over here and see if I can find it on here. Okay, I'm gonna come on over here and see if I can find it on here. Anyways, Wall's talking about how he wants a shadow government. And he was on a podcast when he was saying it. Sorry, my computer's still lagging. Anyway, so with the merging of us with the machines and that was planned either way. Same thing with the Asiri stuff with the whole we're going to be doing the digital twin stuff with the mapping. And Walls actually spoke at the Asiri conference. So give me 1 second here. I have to plug in my computer before it dies. Okay, there we go. So yeah, it had ended up being that they had been planning the Asiri stuff for quite a while. Tim Walz talks about how he had partnered with the Siri with the GIS stuff many years ago, back when he was working in Nebraska in that. And so we went over the Siri stuff. I do want to go over a couple of other things too, specifically with here in Minnesota, how they like to use the psyops to cover up stuff on both the left and the right. So the One Minnesota conference stuff that we've been going over already has shown, and not in today's episode, this has been in previous episodes, has shown that they literally, since the 60s, knew the problems with Minneapolis, right? And with people moving out, whatever else. And they got together into the Minnesota Futures Conference. That wasn't just for the Twin Cities, that's for the entire state. And they've been importing people in order to be able to make up for the people that leave. So sorry, I'm trying to get to the specific file in my Dropbox, and I posted it here on X about the bribery the city council member. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to pull that up. Okay, this should be it. Yep. So we're going to share this tab. This is one of them. So there was another one as well. Okay, so the Senator Hillary case is that Senator Hillary was a one of the elected officials of the county board, and she ended up being in problems with gambling debt, and so she took out loans from Robert Sabes, who at the same time was convicted, not convicted, was being looked at by the FBI of being on the Gambino and Lucchese payroll and that. And in 1993, when they testified in front of Congress, when Trump did, there was another person that testified that the Sabes family is connected to the Lucchese crime family. So that was coming out. And then you have to remember that Maxwell was up here as well. Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's dad. And so give me 1 second here. I'm going to see if I can pull up the Maxwell Gorbachev Center. Yeah, Maxwell Gorbachev Institute. right here from the Post Bulletin. Right. And so Maxwell actually bought out one of the farming magazines up here. He's the guy from McGraw-Hill in that, which got into the Department of Education, whatever. But he was a Mossad agent, and so right after they announced this, he was Rudy Perpich's friend. He's also a friend of what's his name, Mondale too, right? So anyway, the center ended up not happening because Gorbachev ended up belly up. Not Gorbachev, Maxwell ended up belly up, right? But yeah, we almost had that. And then in the 1990s is also when we sold the Cray computer to China as well. But the BCCI thing was happening, and that led back to Minnesota. There was rumors that the Franklin cover-up ended up, oh geez, all these links aren't working. Let's see if I can get it to work. Okay. There we go. I'm going to close out all these other tabs actually, because it's lagging way too bad. Okay. So, hopefully this doesn't totally shut down, but we shall see. The main thing I wanted to go over in respect to that is there's a lot of CIA and FBI involvement up here. You had the cops literally on the payroll of the gangs, even in the 70s and 80s. There's plenty of newspaper articles on that. Hey, let's see if it'll actually work now. So if I can get the newspapers.com one to work, I can actually pull up the newspaper articles. Sorry, it was just lagging really, really bad. Here we go. So if I go into the clippings, in here, I have ones from the 70s and 80s where like, oh yeah, Stu Peters NHL hoax and stuff like that too. The orphan trains, the opium, yeah, the secret societies. Anyway, one of these in here is going to have the oh yeah, let's see, CIA LSD in Minnesota. Sorry, one of these has the cops doing hookers and blow. Oh, here's MPD payouts. I have Ellison on the crime bill. There's a lot in here. Here's the COINTELPRO stuff from Minnesota. Oh, this one is the COINTELPRO where they try to get the Nazis to fight the or KKK, whatever, to fight the commies. there's liability payouts for the city. So that's what that one was. Let me share this one. Yeah. So the FBI official was tried for 2 years. The clash between the mafia and the communists and stuff like that. Operation Hoodwinked. Under J. Edgar Hoover. Nobody does it like you. So, yeah, they try to get the Weathermen, the Black Panthers, and the Ku Klux Klan and civil rights organizations to all fight. And it gets interesting, right? But neither side fell for it. Oh, here we go. Bingo. So yeah, they had the FBI agents in on this too. Okay. So the FBI was literally doing hookers and blow in the 80s there with the mob. Right. And so the FBI was also looking into the illegal gambling, but they were also doing the gambling as well. So like, you can be just investigating yourself, bro, or what? You know, it just gets interesting. I'm gonna close some of these out, but then on Hoff, it gets even more interesting because so the way that went down is 2 months before Chief Willis had talked to Congress, and he had sort of said, "Hey, look, we're not the ones bringing in the weapons and drugs." And me and Chaz have gone over that, you know, in the 80s, right? So shortly after that thing I just showed you, right? Casey Ramirez was the guy that did the Miami of the North. So you had him running cocaine and that through Princeton, Minnesota. I'm going to see if I can pull it up real quick. Yeah. Jose Diego Casey Ramirez. Anyway, he was involved with Iran-Contra and that, right? And then you had the Jordan sex abuse stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on that ties into the Johnny Gosh stuff. It ties into the Boys Town. It ties into the Republicans at the time, because Larry King did. Okay. And it's not the first time that Minnesota has been in the controversy with some of the political figures, right? They can't keep their stuff in their pants. So, yeah. So Casey Ramirez literally bought the entire town of Princeton, like their airport. Redid that for them. He ended up buying the town's cop cars and stuff like that, right? And they nailed him for the income taxes. But the officer said in his statement that Ramirez claimed 19 sources of income, including employment as a CIA agent. So, and he claimed in court that he was a CIA agent. But yeah, he used to go down to the Bahamas, Grand Island, and pick up cocaine. Resorts International. And that ended up being interesting because Trump sort of getting Resorts International, you know. So, like, these guys are all involved with Iran-Contra. You go down the list. But the biggest part of the stuff that was going on around that time is the kids that killed Jerry Hoff. They were framed, man. They didn't do it. Like there was eyewitnesses that they brought the boys back by to see if they could identify them. They couldn't identify them. The clothes didn't match up. You go down the list. Like there's original clippings from down here. So and then afterwards the cops went out and they were beating people and everybody was just okay with it. And oh sorry, let me share that again. There we go. So yeah, the kids didn't do it though. So they framed these kids. And guess who got the reward? In here, the reward was given to McAfee and is McAfee and Ellison. Here we go. And literally, McAfee's on record stating some other stuff too. Okay, this is where they really started getting into the big money. So in the 80s, it did have a little bit of the violence intervention and stuff like that. But so the blowback that happened from this all is that the cops sort of went hog wild. They just sort of beat the heck out of whoever they wanted. And it was in the newspapers even said, hey, you have to let them blow off steam for some of the cases. But there's documents in other political magazines or whatever that talk about the rides to the river they used to do, and this has all been confirmed by sources independently that had forgotten about it. But like when I bring this up to anybody from that's been around North Minneapolis, they remember the rides to the river. They remember all of this, So my guess is after doing independent confirmation that so. So the gang coalition that they had at the time was United for Peace, sort of like 21 Days of Peace, right? And all that jazz. It was Spike Moss, Sharif Willis, and Keith Ellison, and Jerry McAfee. Okay, so they got money from him turning himself in. And this is a different. Wait, this is 1994, so this is a different one. Let me see if I can pull up the one about the other reward. Because they also got the reward back then too for the boys. Forget which one they went to Chicago for. I'm gonna find that one. But here's McAfee talking about how they control the community and the recipe to becoming a leader. And Spike Moss is there too. Randolph Stetton, Jerry McAfee, and Don Samuels. So they literally choose who's running the community, which gets interesting. I think this is the one that says about the reward. There's a whole hoopla about it because Ellison and them went down to pick up the boys. So let me see if it's in here. Yeah, so they offered up to $15,000 reward. Let me see where I can find where Ellison went down there. 1 second. So the biggest part about this is Bobby Joe Champion and Keith Ellison were doing pro bono work, whatever, out in the community. But Bobby Joe Champions, they worked for some legal help. All right. Bobby Joe Champion was also working for the Attorney General's office at the time too, which was Humphrey Jr. And we already showed you earlier how the Humphreys were tied into the mob and the commies. So this is a little bit about Ellison demonstrating against the police and stuff. But I'm going to see where in here it says it about the reward. He's the one that got the reward. Him and McAfee. I'm going to try one last search on they went with some news anchors down there. Everybody got upset about it. So anyway, they made a lot of money, a lot of fame off it. But both sides have played with it. So like same thing with the illegal immigration or the immigration in general. The refugees or whatever. The GOP knows in Minnesota that they'd be sort of hosed without it because of the apportionment of reps by area, right? And I'll play a little clip real quick from Governor Walz talking about that. And what's his name? The doctor that tried to run, Scott Jensen. Okay, so right here is where Ellison talks about it. I was able to find it. It's in Hamline School of Law stuff, right? It's also in the newspapers too. So WCCO actually chartered a plane or whatever. So Ellison got news crews to go with them, and they went down there and they got Mackenzie. But yeah, it gets interesting when you start to read through everything. So he actually got reward money and stuff from it too. It's a big debate on whether or not they should and what the role of media is in that and all that jazz. But those kids were innocent. I'm gonna pull up the one Minnesota stuff, and then I'm just gonna real quick talk about that because it goes into the RDOs. I'm just gonna just for 2 seconds talk about it. Because the West Central Initiative is in Minnesota, and it's this weird conglomerate. So this is UN backed, but then it also came from like the McKnight Foundation, because the McKnight Foundation got together and they came up with these different foundations. You have like the West Central Initiative Foundation and stuff like that, right? You have regional development groups. Mission, I think that's probably the right one. So anyway, you have these regional development organizations that then got funded by the government after this, and they basically decide what's going to happen for your region, and including they can tax you as well. But then they also get state funding. So it just gets into this really weird area that everybody knows about, and like no one wants to do anything about, because the way it gets apportioned is real interesting. A vibrant, inclusive world. Yeah. But here's the one Minnesota stuff, right? And it goes back to the same type of time. So you have the horizons, and then you have your RDOs. Okay, so it started in 1975. Before that is when you have your RDOs. Your RDOs started in 68. It's the Regional Development Authority or Commission. So the Regional Development Commissions and organizations. So you have the DOT part of it, and then okay, so over here it shows what the RDOs are, okay, where they're at, all that jazz. Okay, this is for the transportation side. These are the statutes that actually like give them their teeth. Okay, and here's even on Wikipedia talks about it. There's Harold Lavender, right? And they do urban planning, economic development, emergency management. So these were your COVID guys, right? And here's the list of them. And then yeah, it goes through councils of governments and stuff like that. So over here's a statute, and we're just going to go to 46.2. And you have to scroll down to the Regional Development Act, okay? And it tells you in here, like, how these things are apportioned, and then the annual reports and stuff like that. But it does allow them to borrow money. It allows them to tax. It allows them to do a lot of different things. And they have to like come together and decide to do the commission. I'm just going to give an example here, like the commission membership. So from each county over 100,000, they get an additional board member, and then you go down the list, right? So you can really easily get it to where somebody's just basically taking over. So so each from the council of government, some from cities, some from rural, 2 school board members. Some of these bases that on kids too, and then minority groups, right? So that the problem is, if you go back over to your areas, dude, some of those may not have many minorities, and then you add in, you automatically have the tribes that sit on the council too. So they're sovereign, but they're also sitting on the regional councils as well. And I've gone over where the different casinos are located, but like you have one here, there's the one out here, then you have one in Morton, I think. So then there's one up here, one over here. So it ends up being like only 2 or 3 of these actually do not have a casino in there. And in Scott County, you have one, right, for the Met Council. And so it just gets interesting. Because then you also got to look at like what's associated with that, and then the crimes, and then whatever else. Okay. And in these rural areas, you also have the population decline that's happening too. So eventually, I mean, those casinos are going to go belly up unless they get into the online gaming, which again goes back to the Sabes and the Bermans, right? So Gaming Corp of America, they now is Innovative Gaming Corp of America, and like they do a lot of the online gaming stuff, and that's sort of like what they were trying to push with the Republicans, right? I mean, like the Republicans in Minnesota are just as bad with this stuff. I mean, they're bought off too by big companies, Big Ag, and then you know the casino. It's like, come on, dude. The MMPOA, like it's not even a joke, man. Give me 1 second here. Here's an article that came out not too long ago that I had shared out. I'm trying to find. Yeah, right here's one of them, one of the articles, and it shows that, yeah, it's the population declining in rural Minnesota. But the only way that they've been able to keep afloat is immigrants coming in. So yeah, these are all negative birth, positive migration, so either internal or external. Oh, the grayish white there. I'll probably do another short video tomorrow. There's only a few other things that I wanted to go over, and I know it was lagging real bad earlier. I don't think I should go past 3 hours. This is the one I was trying to get to. The 10 challenges, whatever, the mega trends that'll shape Minnesota's future. So slowing population growth, right? So the last time Minnesota lost a congressional seat was after 1960 census. So that's the reason why they've been wanting to keep the population up, right? And so how they did that was by bringing over people. A lot of times those people were part of this that CIA ops. Okay, and just because people are somebody who's a part of the CIA ops doesn't mean they know it. Because with the CIA and FBI, they work on those things, is that they'll take a good idea and they'll just radicalize it. Okay, so they'll be the people pulling the strings behind the scenes, basically, right? So like they'll take the left's anger right now and just like the cute boots, whatever it was thing that they were doing on TikTok, something about cute winter boots. They're actually talking about like other stuff, you know, like pew pews. And yeah, they're trying to get people to be all radical and stuff and do stupid stuff. And then there's gonna be a clampdown, and they're the ones behind the clampdown too. And you know, it doesn't matter if Walls would have gotten in, they would have tried the same thing with the right. They had it primed on either side and ready to go. Yeah, world depopulation and farmless farms right here. You know, all this stuff was already known, man. So it might give the DFL more of an advantage with the mass deportations, and then, you know, but I guess we have a few more years to the next census, but interesting, you know, declining college enrollment, racial transformation, decline of the white working class. Okay, like by 2038, there'll be 70% non-white, all that jazz. So like these are the things I've been talking about, and again, these are mega trends that like they're actually, this is their plan, this is what they're trying to do, right? But you got to realize how they're going to get there. I already showed you it's not through natural population. What's it through? It's through immigration. So they're literally replacing you, and they're choosing who they're going to put in that place. And then if you get with Musk's automation and whatever else, and the Bitcoin, and them trying to trap you into your Siri digital double thing that we talked about, it just gets interesting, right? Because like, are you going to go Ready Player One, or are we actually going to like decide to live differently? But it's up to you to decide. You can just say no, that you don't want the government ruling over your life. And I wouldn't suggest going out and getting in these crazy groups where you're going to get yourself in trouble either on the left or the right. I think you have a brain on your head and you can do your own research, and you gotta stop and think, man. There's a lot more to history, and yeah, they control both sides, man, and they'll make people seem like wacko on either side. And we need a smaller government, and we need to be able to have a say in our government. You know, we need the Constitution to apply equally and fairly to all. You know, but if I go back over the one Minnesota stuff, here it is. Yeah, they like literally, I mean, they plan it all out, right? And even after the decline in the early 1900s that I showed you guys earlier, they just keep on with the same thing. It's always about education. It's always about this. It's always about immigration. It's always about, well, then maybe you guys need to stop messing it up, because obviously you are, and all I care about is those big companies, but those big companies then move away or they sell off overseas, and I think that, we should care about Minnesotans and not just these huge companies, but also like smaller companies and building up those things. Because once that population goes down, you think that the Walmart's going to stay open just because it's the only store in the area if it's not making enough money? No, you're going to have it closed down. All those big box stores. So actually having a scalable, small, local butcher, hardware store, mechanic, you go down the list, right? So yeah, this is the one from 07. This is the one we've been listening to the audio on. I just wanted to show you, like, yeah, they talk about the demographics in here. They talk about all that jazz. Yeah. So, and again, the REO people come up to here, and it's the same sort of thing that they have the businesses, and you go down the list, the nonprofits, NGOs. The RDOs actually administer grants too. If you look at their different grants. So like, what are we actually doing, guys? You know what I mean? So I'm gonna go back over to here. Yeah, they do the grants administration, and all that jazz. And some of the grants get real interesting. They have their SDGs here and their UN partnership. So this all started in the 60s, guys. Okay. That's when it was like into law and put into law and all that jazz. Because it really was. And then they moved right into the World Future Society and the One Minnesota and the Minnesota Futures Commission. So yeah, this is both Republican and Democrat, and if you don't believe that, oops, I guess it stopped sharing. I'm gonna have to go back over here and reshare. But if you don't believe that, I got something to tell you, because right over here, reshare it. And we showed this last week too, right? So we're gonna go to One Minnesota and then go to 2024. This was the final one. Now they have something else. I'll have to recheck and see. I had it in my history here, and I talked about it. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So Lisa DeMuth was introducing people, right? The Minority Leader Johnson. And this was last year. So like Hortman, you know what I mean? So all these people are sitting down together and like sort of like planning our future. So maybe we should just like say we don't want you doing that. I understand there is some government planning that needs to be put in place, but 2019 is when Governor Walz sort of put in the emergency power stuff that he wanted with the executive orders and that. And that was part of his shadow government. So it's just, it gets interesting, guys. And, we can do better. Individual liberty and justice for all. I mean, that's it. So I don't have anything else. Let's see if there's any more comments, and then I think I'm done. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play out the music for taking off tonight. And then you guys take care. Again, go check out Ashton Forbes, Whitney Webb as well. There's a lot of great people to follow. The biodigital surveillance or convergence stuff that Whitney Webb talks about, though, is huge. So please, like, look up Whitney Webb, follow her, because, like, yeah, that is exactly what's happening. And that was going to happen either way. It's just there's two different sides to the post-humanism or transhumanism. I mean, you have the CRISPR gene editing, that side. And once they push that far enough, then you have the biodigital as well. But the biodigital couldn't have happened. So Musk's stuff couldn't have happened before they ended up doing the 5G push and everything else. You had to have the COVID and whatever else first. Otherwise, people wouldn't have accepted it, and they wouldn't accept their digital twin and all that jazz. You wouldn't have been able to do it. So that's just that, man.
Engines fire up and ready to help it soar. 70 takes quantum pole. Mayday, dangerous lithium battery fire. 239 lives and risk situation so dire. Lost contact with this Boeing commercial airplane. Faulty satellite data being the weak link in this chain. 20 superconductor scientists on this flight. Does that have anything to do with it? It just might. 1, 2, 3 plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that's a technology to these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 off with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. What's the notion? Island ocean, but more out west for this slight of hand. For 4 days the passenger phones were on. Who's responsible for these people being gone? Classified documents like a sales promotion. Debris found in ocean. Dark point energy, not solid, liquid, or gas. Plasma is the key. A paradigm shift in our technology and unlimited. Floating through the air round and round as we stand helpless on the ground. Orbs of light defying what we were taught. We've been lied to by science is my next thought. Whistleblowers dying or getting disappeared. Heads of industry saying nothing to see here. Isn't that just a little weird? By humans this was created and engineered. 1, 2, 3 plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's a 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that's the technology to these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 orbs with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. The ether is real. This is the spiel. The truth will come out. The truth will be shown. What happened to Flight 370? Around the world it will soon be known.